Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So in today's class we will have a few important news articles. So we will discuss all those important news articles one by one. So before discussing them, first try to solve yesterday's practice question. The question was, consider the following statements. Consider the following nations. So a set of nations have been given here, and which of the above nations are actually sharing its borders with Israel? So that is the question. Now yesterday also I have told you that Israel, Middle East is very important for the UPSC Prelims examination. So therefore you need to identify where is West Bank located, where is Gaza Strip is located, and what are the countries with which Israel has been sharing its borders. So all those questions are very important. Now, so if you look at the border of Israel, so it has been sharing its borders with Egypt, and apart from Egypt, it also shares its borders with Jordan. Jordan is on the eastern side of Israel, and you can also see Syria also sharing its borders with Israel, and on top in north, Lebanon also sharing its borders with the Israel. Now on the other hand, the region which is marked in yellow, actually Palestine. Okay, so this is all Palestine, and this is West Bank, right? This is West Bank, and this region is known as Gaza Strip. Okay, so please make sure that you identify West Bank, Gaza Strip, and all the countries with which Israel has been sharing its borders. Now let's come to the question. Given nations, Egypt shares its borders, Lebanon shares its border with Israel, and Jordan also shares its borders with Israel, but except Iran, because Iran will not share its borders with the Israel. Rather, Iran shares its borders with Kuwait and Iraq, those countries. So therefore the correct answer for this question is option C. Only three countries shares its borders with Israel. Now today's practice question is Kalam 250, which was in news recently and is related to which of the following? Okay, so option A, nuclear payload; option B, reusable launch vehicle; option C, rocket motor; and option D, air defense system of India. So please make sure that you answer this particular question in the comment section. Okay, so Kalam, this is with respect to Kalam 250. So please answer the question in the comment section. I'll give the answer in tomorrow's class. Now first very important article is with respect to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Okay, so the government of India has passed Prevention of Money Laundering Act in 2002 to prevent money laundering. The illicit money has been entering into the mainstream economy, and the government wanted to prevent that illicit entry of money into the mainstream economy through Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now in this particular editorial, the author has been discussing that the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been originally passed to prevent illicit drug trafficked money entering into the mainstream economy, but rather now the Prevention of Money Laundering Act is being diluted and it is being used to curb or tackle other issues. So that is what the author has been highlighting here. The Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 is actually under scrutiny. The author says the Prevention of Money Laundering Act is under scrutiny because its broadened scope. The scope of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been broadened or widened, because earlier only money from drug trafficking is considered part of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. However, now various other activities are also comes part of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and because of that reason we can say that it is under scrutiny because of broadened scope beyond its original focus on combating the laundering of drug money. So the original objective of Prevention of Money Laundering is to combat the drug trafficked money. However, the scope of Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been further broadened or widened. So let's try to understand briefly what exactly is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and then we proceed on to discuss the editorial. So the government of India has enacted this particular legislation in the year 2002. So this legislation was enacted in response to India's global commitment to the Vienna Convention. Okay, so Vienna Convention has provided for combating the money, which is combat money laundering. Okay, so Vienna Convention talks about combating the money laundering. So therefore, in order to give effect to the Vienna Convention, the government of India has responded with Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Now, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has actually enables the authorities. Okay, so there is an authority that has been provided under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or law enforcement agencies. So therefore, the Prevention of Money Laundering Authority has actually empowered few authorities in India, or enables authorities in India to confiscate the properties. For example, if these authorities believed that the money has been acquired, or the properties have been acquired through the money which is by the money laundering, they have earned the money through money laundering, so they can confiscate the properties earned by illegally gained proceeds. So confiscation means they can take over the assets, they can take over the properties of the people who have gained those properties by using the money laundering proceeds. Secondly, this particular legislation has also provided for the appointment of adjudicating authority and appellate tribunal also. So both adjudicating authority and appellate tribunal will deal with the cases under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Okay, so this is pertaining to matters that are connected to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And thirdly, the act also adds the concept of reporting entity. Okay, so it also talks about the reporting entity. Now, reporting entity include a banking company, a financial institution, or intermediary. For example, if bank perceives that there is a scope for the money laundering here, okay, so that could be a reporting authority here. Any financial institution or banking company can be a reporting authority here, right? So these are the crux of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now, apart from that, it also has certain salient features. So when we talk about these salient features, it has provided for the Financial Intelligence Unit. So the Financial Intelligence Unit regularly keep tracks of these transactions, these type of money laundering transactions. So better intelligence means that capacity building of existing law enforcement agencies with adequate information on the money laundering transactions. And secondly, it will also provides for the punishment of money laundering. Okay, so in case of money laundering has taken place, then the authorities can confiscate the properties. So that is that is part of the punishment. So therefore, it provides for the punishment of money laundering. And third, there will be adjudicating authority also, and appellate authority also, or appellate tribunal also, that was created as part of the Prevention of Money Laundering. And the burden of proof of innocence is actually lies on the accused individual here. Okay, so the person who is accused of money laundering have to prove himself that he is innocent. So that is where the problem comes, and that is where this particular legislation has made more and more stricter. And apart from that, it also provided for the establishment of special courts. Now, when we talk about the appellate tribunal, because it has provided for the adjudicating authority and appellate tribunal. Now, this appellate tribunal actually constitutes a chairperson and 2 other members, right? So total 3 members, and qualifications are also given. For chairperson, he should have been the judge of the Supreme Court, or qualified to be the judge of a high court. And for members, a member of Indian Legal Service, Revenue Service, or Economic Service, and their tenure is 5 years or till the age of 65 years. So when we talk about the functions, it hears about appeals against the orders of adjudicating authority. Okay, so and the authorities under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now, we very often come across a term called ED, because the rights of ED, Enforcement Directorate, has been a very frequent phenomenon in Indian politics. So therefore, the Enforcement Directorate was established in the year 1956. So please remember, you may have get a question that Prevention of Money Laundering Act has provided for the establishment of ED. This is incorrect, because ED was established in the year 1956 and its headquarters in New Delhi, and it is actually a multidisciplinary organization, and that is mandated to enforce the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So Enforcement Director is actually mandated to enforce the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. So I hope you have understood some basic concepts with respect to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now let's try to understand what the author's view on the present Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So the original objective and background, try to understand this. So first and foremost, there are certain global concerns with respect to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So the enactment of Prevention of Money Laundering Act, we all know that it is as per the Vienna Convention, and Vienna Convention wanted to combat money laundering, right? So it wanted to act on money laundering, especially from illegal drug trafficking, right? So the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has stemmed from international efforts to combat money laundering, particularly proceeds from the drug trafficking, and this is the original intention of making or bringing this Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So in fact, this has also been highlighted by the UN resolutions, and even the establishment of Financial Action Task Force have also talked about the money laundering from the illegal drug trafficking proceeds. So this is the overall objective of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Okay, so it is also considered as a focused legislation because it is primarily targeting the laundering of drug money, right? So with the drug trafficking, the organized groups earn some illicit money. Okay, so organized groups through illegal drug trafficking, they would earn illicit money, and that illicit money is again coming back to the economy. Okay, so that illicit money has been coming back into the economy, and Vienna Convention and all other global organizations wanted to combat the money, the illicit money entering into the mainstream economy. So because of that reason, it is said that it is a focused legislation, because Prevention of Money Laundering Act actually or primarily target the laundering of drug money. So aiming with UN resolutions and Financial Action Task Force recommendations. Secondly, it is considered as a parliamentary enactment. We all know that it is passed through a parliamentary procedure or legislation. Okay, so it has enacted it was enacted by India's Parliament under Article 253 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so Article 253 was the inspiration for the establishment of Prevention of Money Laundering or passing of Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Okay, so to implement international conventions and decisions. So please remember, Vienna Convention has provided for combating money laundering, and Article 253 is talking about the implementation of international conventions and decisions, and Prevention of Money Laundering Act is also passed in this spirit. Okay, so therefore, with its scope confined to subject matter combating drug money laundering only. So the only aim of Prevention of Money Laundering Act is combating the drug money laundering. Okay, so illicit money that is being entering into the economy through these channels, so earned by illegal drug trafficking. However, in recent times we can see there is an expansion of scope, and that creates a lot of concerns here. First and foremost, inclusion of diverse offenses. So earlier we have said that Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been actually passed for the purpose of combating the drug trafficking, the illicit money that has been earned through drug trafficking. However, over a period of time, there is an inclusion of diverse offenses under this category. Okay, so now it has expanded to include various offenses which are unrelated to the original purpose, such as those listed in the IPC and other special laws, and this has led to the deviation of its overall focus from the drug money laundering. Now, it is said that the author has been saying that Prevention of Money Laundering Act is originally provided for combating the drug money laundering, and it is also inspired from Vienna Convention at the global level. However, over a period of time, the scope of Prevention of Money Laundering Act is broadened or widened. Now it has included IPC and it has also included special laws under it. So therefore, dilution of the purpose of Prevention of Money Laundering Act away from the tackling or combating drug money laundering. So that is what the author has been explaining here. And secondly, the author has also been talking about the uniform application of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, because the act clearly launched for the purpose of drug traffickers, but now it is being uniformly applied across all scheduled offenses. Okay, so IPC or special laws, any offense, so the provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act are being uniformly applied. For example, one provision is confiscation of properties. So confiscation of properties is not just for the drug trafficking money laundering, but it is also for various other offenses. And secondly, this particular legislation also talks about burden of proof. What is this burden of proof? Burden of proof means that the accused individual have to prove that he is innocent. He has to provide the relevant proof to the judiciary that to prove himself as innocent. So therefore, under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, all these provisions are uniformly applied across all these cases. Okay, so for drug traffickers are now applied uniformly across all scheduled offenses, so including non-drug related crimes like corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So now under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the corruption has also been included, because corruption was not the reason to bring Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Rather, combating drug money laundering is the original objective of bringing this particular legislation. But now corruption is also included as part of Prevention of Money Laundering Act under Prevention of Corruption Act of 1988. Okay, because corruption is dealt by Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. Now corruption is now included as part of Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Okay, so apart from that, the presumption of guilt. Now if you look at the Prevention of Money Laundering Act's bail provision under section 45, so there is a presumption of innocence. So that requires the accused to prove his innocence for the bail. So that is burden of proof. So if he wanted to get the bail, he must prove himself as innocent. Only then he will be provided bail. So that is the burden of proof. And when the accused is not able to provide the burden of proof, when the accused is not able to provide himself or herself innocent, then it would lead to the prolonged detention without conducting the trial against the individual, because now the proofs are with the proofs have to be provided by the individual. Okay, so that ultimately concerns the individual rights also. Now if I can explain this to you, for example, imagine person A. Okay, so this particular person is actually arrested by person A is arrested by enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies. Person A is arrested by law enforcement agencies. Now the law enforcement agency must present him before the magistrate, right? So the law enforcement agency must present him before the magistrate, and now magistrate asks for the proofs from the law enforcement agencies. What are the proofs that person A has committed the crime? Okay, so magistrate will ask the law enforcement agencies the proofs that prove person A has committed the crime. Now in this case, the law enforcement agencies are actually facing the burden of proof because they have to provide the burden of proof. But imagine the second case where person B is arrested by Enforcement Directorate under Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Right? Now, this particular person would be under detention and person B would be presented before the magistrate. Now, it is not the responsibility of ED to provide the proof that he has committed the crime. Rather, it is the responsibility of the B to prove himself innocent before the court. Okay, so as long as he will not prove himself innocent, he will remain under the detention. Right? So therefore, it will also lead to the violation of their individual rights because they are under the detention as long as they prove themselves as innocent. So that is where the problem comes, and this is how the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been further broadened and widened. And the concern is that the Prevention of Money Laundering Act is also very often used as a political weapon, as a tool against other individuals. So therefore, in this context, the Enforcement Directorate, so it must be neutral and independent, and there should be limited government interference in the functioning of the Enforcement Directorate. Okay, so and we should not further dilute the Enforcement Directorate. We should not further dilute or broaden the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, because when we broaden the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to include other cases also, so we are forgetting its original intention. The original intention was prevention or combating drug money laundering. So that is also one of the key issues. So therefore, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act must focuses on its original intention, that is combating drug money laundering. Okay, so next important news article is with respect to solar surge. Okay, solar surge. Now when we talk about this particular solar surge, the author has been saying that India's solar industry must grow without compromising its quality. Okay, so as of now, fossil fuels are widely used in energy production or electricity generation. Fossil fuels are widely used in energy production or electricity generation. Now we all know that the fossil fuels very often associated with the greenhouse gas emissions such as carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and all those are increasing the existing global warming, and that further drives to climate change. Okay, so it is responsible for the large scale climate change, the fossil fuels, extensive use of fossil fuels. Now all the countries have announced to become net zero as per their capabilities. So net zero means that they will reduce the emission of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and at the same time they will also develop capacity to absorb the carbon in the atmosphere. Okay, so that is actually the net zero, or it is also called as net neutrality. So in achieving or becoming net neutrality, the renewable energy sources like solar energy plays one of the instrumental and prominent role. Solar energy plays one of the instrumental and prominent role. So however, for solar energy to play a larger role and solar energy to replace the existing fossil fuel based energy systems, we require large scale deployment of solar panels. So that is very important. We need to deploy these solar panels in a large scale. However, if you look at the domestic manufacturing capacity of these solar panels, it is still in the infant stage, still in the nascent phase. So therefore, we have been heavily dependent on China for our imports. China for importing these solar panels. Now, in fact, it is said that 80% of the global solar panels are coming from China alone. So now we wanted to reduce our import dependence from China, and at the same time we need to gradually scale up the domestic solar cells manufacturing capabilities, and that is where we can achieve the net zero targets, and we can also achieve the Panchamrit commitments that are being announced by India in COP27 Glasgow summit. Okay, so now in this context, what the author has been saying that India implements a policy to promote domestic solar panel manufacturing. Now, why it is important to manufacture domestic solar panels? Because we have significantly dependent on China for these solar panels, and at the same time India's domestic solar panel manufacturing is still in the nascent phase. So therefore India has devised a policy to promote domestic solar panel manufacturing, and at the same time reducing its reliance on imports, particularly from China. Amid the ambitious renewable energy targets, so we have ambitious renewable energy targets, and in order to achieve those targets we must gradually scale up our domestic solar energy production or solar panel production. Okay, so now understand this, there are certain challenges that are being involved. So before discussing those challenges, what is the need for such policy implementation? What exactly is the need for such policy implementation? First and foremost, we need to talk about reducing our import dependency. Okay, so India aims to decrease its dependence on imported solar panels. So it wanted to reduce its dependence on imported solar panels, particularly from countries like China, which dominates around 80% of the global supply of these solar panels. Secondly, it also wanted to promote the domestic industry. Okay, so promotion of domestic industry is very important, because when we promote our domestic industry, we will be able to meet our needs. Okay, so at the same time, we will be able to meet our own needs firstly, and secondly, India can become an export hub of solar panels, because we already started or launched International Solar Alliance. So therefore, using this particular goodwill, India can become an export hub of the solar panels because of huge demand at the global level, and also it creates a lot of employment opportunities, and it also provides an opportunity to gradually make a transition from the fossil fuel based economy to more a renewable green economy. Okay, so promoting the domestic industry, the policy actually aims to boost the domestic solar panel manufacturing, and by providing various incentives to existing industries. Okay, so thereby enabling them to compete for government tenders. Now more and more private companies are coming up in manufacturing these solar panels, is actually a welcome initiative. Okay, so because that increases the competition among these companies, and they come up with new technologies, and in fact it also attracts a lot of foreign direct investment into the Indian economy. So after that, we have several ambitious renewable energy targets. So in order to meet all those targets, we also significantly require the solar cells. Okay, so India seeks to source 500 gigawatt of renewable energy. Okay, so India wanted to generate 500 gigawatt of renewable energy, nearly half of its electricity requirement from the non-fossil sources by 2030. So in order to achieve this, we need to rapidly scale up our production capacities, necessitating a significant growth in solar power capacity. So however, in this context, there are certain challenges and also considerations that we need to look into. Firstly, there is a limited domestic capacity of manufacturing the solar panels. Now, if you look at India's domestic solar industry, it has been currently facing a lot of issues and lot of challenges, and it has been struggling to meet the demand of solar panels, because there's a huge demand out in the market, and there's also huge export demand. However, the Indian industry still struggles to meet the demand, and at the same time it requires imports to fulfill the installations. So because of their inability to meet the demand, we have been excessively dependent on imports from other countries, particularly China. So since it has a lot of scope and potential, why we should not develop our domestic solar manufacturing industry? Because that has a lot of potential in creating employment opportunities, and that will also help us significantly scale up the energy generation from these solar panels. Secondly, we need to talk about the competitive pricing of these solar panels, because domestic manufacturers also facing a lot of challenges because of cheap imports from China or cheaper Chinese imports. For example, imagine a domestic solar panel manufacturing unit A. So this has been selling one solar panel for the cost of 700 rupees. But on the other hand, when we import these solar panels from China, it costs just 400 rupees. Now the consumers would prefer the Chinese products rather than the domestic company manufactured solar panels. So the competitive pricing has been benefiting Chinese imports rather than the domestic companies. So therefore, in this context, there is a need to further enhance the capabilities of India's domestic solar panel manufacturing units, so that will increase the competitiveness of Indian solar panels with respect to the Chinese solar panels. And apart from that, the quality assurance is also another important factor, because while promoting the domestic manufacturing, ensuring a stringent quality checks is very important to maintain its affordability and reliability of solar power for the consumers. So when they are more reliable, when they are more affordable from the domestic manufacturing units, the consumer would prefer them the most. And that is where the consumers started purchasing and adopting to these solar panels. And that is where we can make a rapid transition or rapidly scale up our existing solar energy generation capacities. Okay, so this is what the author has been emphasizing on. There is a huge potential and huge growth potential at the global level and even at the domestic level for the solar manufacturing. But we have dependent excessively on China for importing these solar panels. So therefore, we need to scale up our domestic manufacturing capacities. That reduces our reliance on China, the import dependence on China. Okay, so this is what the author has been saying that. The next very important news article is with respect to the Kachativu Island. So this Kachativu Island is actually a disputed island between India and Sri Lanka. And as per agreement that was signed in the year 1974 to 1976, this particular Kachativu Island has been given by India to Sri Lanka. So this is the location of Kachativu Island, and this is India-Sri Lanka maritime boundary. So as per the India-Sri Lanka maritime boundary, the Kachativu Island has belonged to the Sri Lanka. And in recent context, you very often hear about this Kachativu Island, and this Kachativu Island is a disputed island between India and Sri Lanka. Now, what exactly is the Kachativu Island and what is the issue in the present context, we will understand very briefly. So, the Kachativu Island is actually uninhabited offshore island in the Park Strait. Okay, so this is Park Bay, and somewhere you can also see Park Strait. Okay, so a strait is something, a narrow waterway between which is connecting to land masses. Okay, so a narrow water body which is connecting to land masses is considered as strait. So this Kachativu Island is located in Park Strait, and this is uninhabited island. Kachativu Island is an uninhabited island in the Park Strait, and this was formed due to a volcanic eruption in the 14th century. Okay, so this is the location of Kachativu Island. And secondly, it is no more than 1.6 kilometer length and slightly over 300 meter wide at its broadest point. Okay, so this is, a very small island. right? So it is a very small island in the Pak Strait. Even though it is a very small, but it has a lot of importance for India and even for Sri Lanka also. So we can say that it has a lot of importance for India rather than to Sri Lanka. So it lies northeast of Rameshwaram and southwest of Jaffna. So this is the Jaffna city, and it is located southwest of Jaffna city, and it is located northeast of Rameshwaram. So this is what is Rameshwaram, okay, northeast of Rameshwaram and southwest of Jaffna. And one church called Saint Anthony Church, it is early 20th century Catholic shrine, and the only structure that we found in the Kachativu Island. Okay, so this is the only structure that we found in the Kachativu Island, that is Saint Anthony Church. Okay, now what is the maritime boundary agreement between India and Sri Lanka? So fishermen of both countries have been fishing in each other's waters without any conflict for a very long time. Now before this agreement, fishermen of India and fishermen of Sri Lanka so have been fishing in each other's waters. So Sri Lankan fishermen entering into Indian waters, and Indian fishermen have been entering into the Sri Lankan waters. So without any issue, they have been fishing in each other's waters without any conflict for very long time. However, the Kachativu issue or fisherman issue between India and Sri Lanka has emerged when both the countries have signed agreements in 1974 and 1976. So both these countries have signed an agreements. In 1974, the agreement was signed to fix the maritime boundary in the Pak Strait. And this particular maritime boundary that you are seeing is fixed by 1974 maritime boundary agreement between India and Sri Lanka. And as per this agreement, the Kachativu Island has been given to Sri Lanka. Okay, so in 1974 agreement, each country, both India and Sri Lanka, have recognized each other's sovereignty and exclusive jurisdiction and even the control over the waters, because they have demarcated a separate boundary. Okay, so each other's boundary, so they have recognized their sovereignty, exclusive jurisdiction and control over the waters, and even the continental shelf, subsoil falling in its side and aforesaid boundary. So because of this boundary, this waters have been further divided between India and Sri Lanka, and that has created a lot of conflict. Now there are certain activities which are being allowed in this Kachativu Island by Indian fishermen, and certain activities which are being prohibited, because Kachativu Island now it is not belong to India, now it is belong to Sri Lanka. So because of that reason, the Indian fishermen are allowed into the Kachativu Island, so they can access this Kachativu Island. However, there are certain activities which are allowed and certain activities which are prohibited. For example, resting, they can be allowed, and they can they can dry their nets, and they can also visit the annual festival of Saint Anthony Church. Okay, so they can also visit this Kachativu Island without requiring any visa. So these are the activities that are being permitted in the Kachativu Island by Sri Lanka. However, on the other hand, there are certain activities which are prohibited activities for Indian fishermen in this Kachativu Island. So they include the fishing vessel and fishermen of India shall not engage in fishing in the historic waters. So they cannot do fishing in the historic waters in near around this Kachativu Island and the territorial sea and exclusive economic zone of Sri Lanka, because as per the exclusive economic zone and territorial waters of Sri Lanka, so this Kachativu Island comes part of Sri Lanka. So because of that reason, fishing by Indian fishermen is very often prohibited. Now it is marked the international maritime boundary between India and Sri Lanka without consulting the Tamil State Assembly. So that is where the issue has actually started, because most of the fishermen who have been venturing into this region of Sri Lankan waters are Tamil fishermen. And Indian government has ceded this particular territory without consulting the Tamil Nadu State Assembly, and that has further increased the conflict between Indian fishermen and the Sri Lankan government. Now, what is this conflict is all about? Now, when we talk about this conflict, it is emerged out of the fish depletion in the Indian waters. Because Very often, Indian fishermen are found to trespass the Sri Lankan water boundary or Sri Lankan maritime boundary for better fish catch in the area, because Park Strait and Park Bay are the areas where the Indian fishermen can find out better fish. And at the same time, Indian fishermen very often known for modern fishing technique. Okay, so modern fishing technique. So when they have the modern fishing technique, they have more advantage compared to the Sri Lankan fishermen. So because of that reason, Sri Lankan Navy very often opening fire against the Indian fishermen because of this particular reason. And the problem turned into a serious when fish and aquatic life in the Indian continental shelf has actually depleted. The fishermen have less fish catch. Because of that reason, they are very often entering into the maritime boundary of Sri Lanka near around the Kachativu Island. And in fact, they are also using the modern fishing trolleys which actually harm the marine life and the ecosystem in the sensitive Gulf of Mannar and Park Strait. However, very often you can see the frequent arrests and killings of the fishermen, because Sri Lankan authorities have said that they are protecting their maritime boundaries against poaching, securing the livelihood of the Sri Lankan fishermen. So securing the livelihoods of Sri Lankan fishermen is because they have been using modern fishing trolleys. So they have more advantage over the Sri Lankan fishermen. So therefore, by making frequent arrests or even attacking the Indian fishermen, the Sri Lankan Navy says, or Sri Lankan authority says, they are securing the livelihoods of Sri Lankan fishermen. And apart from that, both sides ensure not to use force under any circumstances. However, the violent situation remains the same. So even though there was an agreement between both these countries not to use force under any circumstances, but this has been very often violated. In 2009, Sri Lanka started heavily guarding its maritime boundary in the Park Strait. That is because it wanted to reduce the possibility of return of Tamil insurgents into the Sri Lanka. Okay, so because of that reason, they are heavily guarding. Now, what exactly is India's stand on this Kachativu Island? Now, if you look at India's stand, Union government has argued that the present Union government has argued that since the island is always been under dispute, no territory belonging to India was ceded or sovereignty should be relinquished. Now, in this case, the Union government has been arguing that the erstwhile government has compromised on its sovereignty by ceding the island to Sri Lanka. And now the Indian fishermen have been facing the brunt. And apart from that, according to this agreement, the island lies on the Sri Lankan side of the India-Sri Lanka and international maritime boundary line. Now the fishermen, they cannot venture into the sea. They cannot venture into the waters near around the Kachativu Island, and the activities, there are certain activities are also restricted by the Sri Lankan authorities. So the government has actually raised the issue at the highest political level with Sri Lanka. However, the matter is still pending in the Supreme Court of India. In fact, now Indian government frequently raising the Kachativu issue would actually impact the India-Sri Lanka relations. So therefore, ex-diplomats have been arguing that the government should have to reassess that and review that. Only then it should make such statements. Okay, so ex-diplomats have been warning of impacting the India-Sri Lanka relations because of this particular issue. Okay, so let's discuss another important news article. So that is recently Indian Meteorological Department has issued a warning with respect to heat wave. Okay, so it has issued a warning with respect to heat wave in India. So Indian Meteorological Department predicts that there will be above normal heat wave conditions in April, May. So that is coinciding with the election season. Now the advisories issued to the Election Commission and states to take necessary precautions so that people will not get impacted by the heat wave condition. Now heat wave very often leads to even the death of people because of excess temperatures. Now what exactly is the heat wave scenario? We will understand through this diagram. So heat wave scenario, maximum temperature in plains and in hills. Okay, so heat wave conditions prevail when actually temperatures are above 40 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this is considered as normal maximum temperatures, and when temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius or more, it is considered as deviation from normal, and there will be prevalence of heat wave like condition. Okay, so after that, severe heat wave conditions also prevail. So when will be severe heat wave conditions? Normal maximum temperatures are actually above the 40 degrees Celsius. So 40 degrees Celsius above 6 degrees Celsius, 6 degrees Celsius above the 40 degrees Celsius. So that is when there will be a deviation from the normal temperatures. Okay, so in those circumstances, we can see the heat wave like conditions. So this is the normal average temperatures, and above this normal temperatures, if we see 4 to 5 degrees Celsius more or 6 degrees Celsius more temperatures above this normal temperatures, we can say that so there is a higher level of heat wave like condition or severe heat wave condition. Now what causes these heat waves? We will understand this mechanism. So heat waves are actually generally the result of trapped air. Okay, so air is trapped in a dome like structure, and because of that reason it leads to the further heating of the existing air. So they occur when system of high atmospheric pressure moves into an area that lasts 2 or more days. Okay, so in this particular dome the air cannot trap, so air is trapped and air cannot move anywhere. Okay, so the air further heats up and it will lead to higher air temperatures. So heat waves form when high pressure aloft 3000 to 7600 meters strengthens and remains over a region for several days up to several weeks. Okay, so high pressure systems very often force air downwards. So when high pressure system is formed, the high pressure system will lead to the sinking of air. So that actually push the air downwards. Okay, so this force prevents the air near the ground from rising. So this high force actually prevents rising the air above from the ground. Okay, sinking air actually acts like a cap. So when air is been sinking, it acts like a cap and it traps warm ground in the place. Okay, so this cap traps the warm air, so that actually traps the air in a dome like structure, and that further increases the heat wave conditions that are prevailing over one particular region. Now what are the reasons for rising frequency and intensity of heat waves across India? So there are several reasons. First and foremost, we need to talk about global warming. Global warming is increasing the global temperatures, increasing the temperatures of planet Earth and consequent or resultant climate change. So that lead to increased temperatures, overall increasing the temperatures. For example, the World Meteorological Organization has predicted that average temperature in India has increased by approximately 0.6 degrees Celsius over the last century. And secondly, the local weather conditions are also responsible for the heat wave conditions. For example, clear skies, low humidity, lack of wind, they very often contribute for the temperature buildup. Okay, so example, during a heat wave, clear skies allow for maximum solar radiation. Now when skies are clear, so that results in maximum solar radiation. Now if you look at deserts, why deserts have higher solar insolation, higher solar radiation? Because of there are clear skies. Okay, so heat wave, there's a clear skies allow maximum solar radiation to reach the Earth's surface, and that leads to the increased heating. And secondly, we need to talk about the urbanization also, and even the concrete structures in cities lead to the urban heat island effect, because the concrete structures very often absorb the excess heat. Okay, so that further increases the temperatures in those urban areas, and that is known as urban heat effect. And urban heat is a very common phenomenon in cities like New Delhi, and it is also said that these urban areas are also called as concrete jungles. So they are very often called as concrete jungles. And after that, we should talk about the deforestation also. So deforestation and land use changes are affecting the local climate patterns and reducing the natural cooling mechanisms also. So these are some of the factors which are actually responsible for the heat wave like conditions or further enhancing or increasing the intensity of these heat waves. Now there are set of measures that can be taken. For example, heat wave action plan. Heat wave action plan must be in place to reduce the heat waves. Followed by that, there should be early warning systems for these heat waves, and regular advisories must be provided to increase or enhance awareness among the people about these heat wave like conditions. So after that, we need to talk about the sustainable urban planning also. Sustainable urban planning where there is a more green cover. So that also helps in reducing the urban heat island effect and also reducing the intensity of these heat waves. So followed by that, we should also emphasize on afforestation. Okay, so afforestation. So apart from afforestation, we should also take concerted actions to reduce global warming and climate change, and these measures can safeguard us from the intensity and frequency of these heat waves. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. Please like the video and also try to subscribe our YouTube channel so that we can come up with more and more classes on this. Thank you so much.